Welcome to Facing Inward, where patient experiences become shared wisdom. This podcast is a space for candid conversations with patients, caregivers, and healthcare professionals who believe that every story holds the power to heal, educate, and inspire change. Whether you're navigating your own health journey or seeking to better understand the human side of healthcare, you belong here. And now your host, Melissa Carter.
While 1 in 8 women in the United States will face a breast cancer diagnosis, today's guest, a familiar voice to Atlanta radio listeners, shows us how survival is not just possible, but transformative. She has spent years connecting with audiences through her work on the airwaves, and now she's opening up about a deeply personal journey that reshaped her life both on and off the mic. In sharing her story, she not only offers hope to others facing breast cancer, but also reminds us of the resilience and strength that can emerge from life's most difficult chapters. I am honored to welcome Kaedy Kiely to the conversation. So Kaedy probably hates for me to always tell this story, but Kaedy, I got to tell the bus story again. So,
All right.
so Kaedy and I have never worked together, oddly enough, but we've known each other for a very long time. And she was one of my inspirations when I got into Atlanta morning radio. Remind me, which station were you coming back to, or you were back on air with when you got the bus?
I was going from 96 Rock to Z93 and I couldn't work. I had a non-compete for 3 months. So that was during that time they made the little bus thing, and that was my, it wasn't little, it was actually really big.
Yeah.
And it was fun.
So our public transit system, the entire side of the bus was Kaedy facing the other direction. So it was her back with her head kind of turned over her shoulder, kind of looking at you. And it said Katie's back. And then it was, the station logo. And I just remember seeing that. I thought, oh my gosh, I want that someday. I want to be that popular someday. And I never got a bus, but that's okay. But
Oh, please, you were on billboards everywhere and stuff. I remember seeing you everywhere, girl. That's so fun and
anyways,
funny.
I just adore Kaedy Kiely, and so were you. But we are here to talk about not your radio experience, even though you can incorporate that in this because we all have to work even when we are diagnosed with something. So
Yeah.
let's talk about your breast cancer journey. Did you have any family history of this before you were diagnosed?
None at all, Melissa. It just came out of left field. Left field.
And that is why it's important to go to the doctor, because that's what happened with you, right? You didn't find this
Yep.
initially.
No, I actually I went for my yearly just gynecologist appointment. And so they always do a breast exam. And I remember she and I were chatting because we're friendly. While she was doing the breast exam, she hesitated. And so of course I just went, what is she hesitating for? But she kept talking, but she hesitated, and then just kind of went on, and took a deep breath and went, okay, thank goodness. So when I was in the shower a couple of days later, I was thinking about it, and was feeling where she was feeling, just under my armpit. And boy, it was a pronounced lump. I really couldn't believe it. And I just went cold because I thought, this is what people talk about. This is how it feels. This is different. I just knew right away.
One of the things that I found for myself, and it happened to be, and Katie's been kind enough to read my book, but it was
Oh, it's
I
fabulous.
was getting an EKG when I was starting to get sick with my kidneys, and I was left alone in this room. And it wasn't until that moment that it hit me how serious this was going to be and how it wasn't going to be an easy fix. And so that transition from my life is whatever normal, I'm complaining about my coffee not being warm enough this morning, and now I found a lump in the shower. How did you come out of the shower, and what was your first thoughts?
My first thought, as I said a minute ago, is that I knew that it wasn't good. I just knew, and because you know your body and you know yourself. One thing I do want to say is a lot of my friends, we talked about it afterwards. When they shower, they'll use a face cloth or cloth to soap up, and I will use one from time to time, but I always use my hands just because I felt that is the best way to kind of check. It was obviously the way that needed to be done, soapy and to just be slick and to be able to feel it that easily. Well, I have a funny story. It was on a Saturday night, and I had to wait a day before I could call somebody, and I thought I need to call the gyno and say, hey, what did you feel or whatever? And so on Monday morning, I was on the air. You were probably two doors down from me at the time. And as soon as it was like 7 o'clock, I thought, ooh, the doctor's office has got to be open now. I made the call, right? And so I start talking and I'm like, oh my gosh, I just saw the doctor recently and they were doing the breast exam and they kind of hesitated. And then anyway, then Saturday night I felt it myself. And there's this sound of crickets at the end of my litany here. The lady on the phone goes, this is Dr. Hallman's office. It's your dentist office.
You poor
And
thing. Oh my gosh, that's
I was
hilarious.
mortified. Not only that, that dentist I'd been seeing since I was 10. So his
Oh my
wife calls me later on, and he calls me later on. I'm like, oh my God, please leave me alone. I don't know what's going on, you know?
Oh, you poor. Well, it shows you the frantic because you've had since Saturday night until Monday morning to think about this, and
Yes.
you're like half conscious on the air trying to do your job while checking the clock to make to when they open. And I think that's because that's usually what happens to me if I'm in a chaotic state. That's when all these mistakes are made, right? So that
Yes. Exactly.
and then
At
you
least that
vomited
one
all this
wasn't.
out, and it was the wrong doctor. But obviously, you talked to the right doctor. And what's the for
Yes.
those who have never been through this? What is the first steps that they take? Like, is it an immediate thing? You got to come in. What's
Yeah,
the
well, she said
procedure?
to me, she said, come back in. And then we did another breast exam, and she said it was not this pronounced when I was feeling. And she said, I mean, it happened really fast because they got me right in to do a biopsy. And she was the one who called me and said, it's
Mm.
cancer. Literally, those words, it's
Mm.
cancer. And I was like, oh no, what's going to happen now?
How long did you have to
Um,
wait for that phone call?
it felt like too long, but probably a day or two.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I was going to say with cancer, and especially if they assumed that this was going to be malignant, that it has to be done fast.
Yes, and it was interesting because I went. One of my best friends is a doctor in Florida. Sadly, she doesn't. She's not in Georgia. Otherwise, she'd be my doctor. She's amazing, and she said, if they say to you, "Hey, we want to do something else," let's make another appointment. She said, just ask them to do it now. And so I did, and they did. So a lot of stuff we just sort of fast tracked, just so I could know. But when you said, "What do you?" and I bet you felt this way too. I can remember lying in bed one night and the worst thing I could think was going to happen was that I
Mhm.
was going to lose my hair. And why women are the way
Right.
they are about their
Mm.
hair is just,
Well,
it's
we're defined
bizarre.
well, we're defined, I'm generalizing, of course, but I feel like we're defined by our beauty. I mean, that's what people value
Yes.
in us, and we still fall I mean, I still look around at young women and the things that they are entertained by and the things that they wanna do, and it's like, "Oh, we're in this, like, hamster wheel of you gotta have the right weight, you gotta have the right face, you gotta have the right hair." No, I think that that's probably the most common thing for women who get this diagnosis, the first thing they think about.
Is what am I going to look like bald?
Right.
You're just like, and here I am jumping right way ahead. But at the same time, I started thinking about what is the worst case scenario. I literally remember the night lying in bed saying this to myself. And all of a sudden, I went, wait a second, because I do believe in God and I believe in Jesus. And I was raised that way and it's a foundation and thank God that I have. And all of a sudden there just this peace came over me and I thought, no matter what happens, you're gonna be okay.
Mm.
You're gonna be okay. And the only person I really needed to worry about was my mom because we're super close and she would be very, very upset if something horrible happened to me. I mean, a lot of people would, but she relied on me. But I didn't have children, that I can't even imagine lying in bed and thinking, oh, what's going to happen to my kids,
Yeah.
So very, very quickly, I had the thought, I am going to be okay no matter what. God's got me. And then I put blinders on. Literally, I just focused on. My doctor friend said, get the best doctors that you feel comfortable with, and then put blinders on and don't let anybody sway you and say, go fly to some funny island and get, eat pampas fruit or something, don't do chemo.
Right, right.
Just focus. And that's what I did. I literally put the blinders on and went forth. And I
Well,
did lose my hair,
you did lose
had
your
to
hair.
do the chemo, and it was not the worst thing ever.
Did it come out in a clump and you decided to shave it, or did you let it go naturally? How did that process go?
I wanted to have as much control over this as I could have, which is really very little. So the hair thing was a big deal to me. And I had a friend that had undergone really some tremendous chemo and that made you really sick and stuff just a couple of years beforehand. So I knew what bald was going to look like, not pretty. I was going to shave it before it came out. But the day that I was going to go shave my head and get fitted for a wig, my hair was still there. It looked perfectly fine. And so I go into the little place with my friend and I'm like, you know what? I don't know if I'm really ready to shave my head because my hair feels fine. And the hairdresser starts pulling her fingers through my hair. And all of a sudden we're looking at hair coming out in
Mm,
clumps. And I was
mhm.
like, ooh, that timing is interesting. So we did it right there. And she said, do you want to do a mohawk? And I was like, nope, this is not fun. Let's just do it. I was not going to have a great time doing this. Let's
Right,
just do
right,
it. My friend
yes.
was there with me. I'm trying to think. I think the wig might have already been ready, but the thing that saved me on that, I called her Bridget, was my wig. It was the greatest freaking thing ever. And my insurance paid for it, and it looked exactly like my hair. Exactly. I remember going to work the next day, and somebody from down the hall was like, "Oh, your hair looks nice." I was like, "Thank you. You would die if I pulled this off
Dude,
right now
I
with
don't ever
you."
remember because when you I assumed that you had lost your hair, but looking back, I don't ever remember. So, obviously, Bridget did her job because
It was
I don't remember that.
amazing, badass. I will share pictures with you of it because it was just one of, and the thing is it wasn't, I don't feel like I'm that vain, but I wanted to feel strong and I didn't want to feel weak. And I remembered watching this other friend of mine going through it her way, right? Like she had to have mastectomies and she didn't want to wear a wig and didn't do anything with makeup and stuff. And I was like, well, she's married, she has kids. Maybe this is, I don't know why she's chosen just to do it that way, but
Mhm.
that's not how I feel. I feel like I needed some armor. And that wig for me was just incredible because, with what we do in radio, so we're out and about all the time.
Right.
So people are seeing you and taking pictures and posting online and stuff. And I just wanted to look as much myself more so other people were comfortable with it too, and it was great for me. It worked. It was amazing.
Are you at risk of having a stroke or heart disease? Lifeline Screening offers an affordable package of preventative health screenings to detect your risk factor. Screenings are easy, painless, and non invasive, and located in your area. Click our link in the show notes to schedule your appointment. I know for me, when I was on dialysis, that going to work was also very important to keep my routine going. I was dating someone at the time, and there was one morning she said, "Why don't you just call
Yes.
in today?" And I was like, "Then what do I do tomorrow? And what do I do the next day? Because I don't have the flu. Like this is my new normal." With such a dramatic lack of energy that I have to go. And so it makes sense too that you're doing this so because I liked going to work and nobody talking about it. I just wanted to feel normal. So if you don't mind talking about how work helped you or if it didn't help you during this time.
Well, I had to take a day off work and I didn't want to, but the day I was going to have my biopsy, I went to on the air in the morning and then I was going to have it done afterwards. And it was on a Thursday and they would not let me come to work Friday. And literally they were like, We just won't allow it. It's because you're having some, whatever." And I'm like, all right. So my boss encouraged me right before I was getting ready to go off the air to tell my listeners what was going on.
Mm.
And I was like, that is not me. I am a real private
Yeah, yeah,
person.
yeah.
But something made me go, okay, And I'm sorry I did on the one hand because it sounded like I was crying and I wasn't really crying. But when your voice gets emotional
Yeah, you get
and
shaky.
yes, yes. So everybody thought I was crying, which I really wasn't. I don't know why I have to defend that. But when I started talking, I got super emotional and I said, look, here's what's going on with me. But I got emotional only when I started talking about my mom. And I said, I'm okay. I said, but I'm really worried about, my mom just because she's real worried. And I said, but I'm sure everything's going to be fine. I'll let you know. But that's why I'm not going to be here tomorrow. I'll be back on Monday. And little to my knowledge at all, I mean, I didn't know at all that set off a huge, there were like hundreds of phone calls on the answering machine request line thing
Yeah.
when I came back on Monday. And it was like, people were like, I'm praying for you. And
I'm
I
not surprised. I don't
kept
know why you're surprised by that. I'm not surprised.
Well, I didn't make it sound like too big of a deal, but I got a little emotional, right?
Yeah.
I guess I'm just because I know it's a big deal, but I didn't want to make it sound like too big of a deal.
Right.
I was shocked. I was just like, "Holy cow!" I didn't even know that many people listen at in a 5 second period. It blew me away. And there were people whose calls I would have a number. They'd say, "Please call me. Let me know you're okay." Those kinds of things. So I talked to a lot of people that have gone through the same thing or worse. And I was blown away by how they're worried about me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, lady, you're telling me about your bills piling up
Yeah.
on your counter, and your children and this and that. And you're praying for me. It was the most amazing, uh, eye opening thing to share. And I realized from now on, I'm going to share a lot more because people need to hear it. They need to know they're not alone. And I can't believe what comes back to you when you share.
Yeah.
It's incredible. It just makes me emotional now thinking about it because there are people that are these are people you don't know, but they
Right.
know you because they listen to you every day. And it was one of the most astounding, remarkable gifts ever to share what I was going through. And so from that point on, I did a blog. I tried to keep upbeat. I had a brother who's sadly no longer with us. He passed away from cancer, but after I had gotten mine. But Joe had told me, he said, Katie, when you're with your doctors and stuff, try to have a sense of humor, he said, because if they think that you're going to be like real serious and scared about everything, they kind of shut down and do their doctor mode. But if you can kind of be funny and fun and let them know that it's light or whatever, you'll be surprised at what they'll tell you. And it was the truth.
Hmm.
And so with every aspect of it, I tried to have a sense of humor about uh, my cat licking my bald head like he was grooming me, and just, things that were just insane. I was in a beauty parlor, right? And I had the wig on and I had washed it. So the guy's just going to style it for me. And he's a good friend of mine. And so he's like, and it was on a Saturday and it was packed with people, right? And so he's blah, blah, blah. We're chit chatting, chit chatting, chit chatting. And all of a sudden I feel whoosh, right? A fucking wig. He pulls it right off my head with the brush. And I see a lady across from me, her eyes got as big as saucers. Just like, what the? And my hairdresser is losing it, right? He's on the ground trying to pick the wig up and get the brush out of the wig. And I'm just sitting there dying, right? Dying, dying, dying.
They're
And
thinking,
then
boy, he got
later,
aggressive. And he pulled her hair off.
people, and I'm like, where was my chin strap? Those things have chin straps. Keep them on your head.
Are you a patient advocate who works with healthcare systems or legislation? Well, please join our show, facinginwardpodcast@gmail.com. Is there anything that you wish healthcare professionals knew from a patient standpoint that they may not be aware of? Because I know when I was sick, there's a lot of times I thought, my doctor, as much as I love her and she's taking care of me, she's not going through this with me. And so, is there anything that you found that you would love to tell doctors and nurses and technicians from the patient's point of view that they may not be aware of?
I think I must have had like I hope it's an experience that everybody would have, but maybe it was exceptional. I can't think of anything.
Hmm.
And I really felt like the people I was around were so concerned, so caring, so compassionate. I loved my doctors. My doc said, "Do you want to be involved in a research project?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't really feel like it, you know." And then my brother was there and he said, Why wouldn't you?" And I said, "I don't know. What does it entail?" And he said, "Well, we're going to take a lot of your blood, but nothing. It's just that you may be helping the next person." I was like, well, "Okay, then let's
Yeah.
do it, you know?" But then once I did it and realized there was nothing to it, it's really important. So if you can do that, if you're invited to be part of research, do it because
Right.
that's how they're going to find a cure, right?
Well, it sounds too. I love that you were encouraged to be vulnerable on air because I have found in my career as well that vulnerability is what connects you with the audience. Like if you're
Yeah.
ever someone who you feel like I can't connect with this either radio personality or television personality or YouTube personality, usually it's because they're not showing you any kind of weakness. So you mentioned earlier you didn't want to come across weak, but yet when you had a vulnerable moment is when you really connected with people. And the same with doing the research and stuff. Like it's at first we all want to be tough and we all want to be perfect. And then you realize, oh, well, once you can relax a little bit and let that down, you actually can connect and help somebody else. And,
Yes.
and I want, for those who have never been through chemo, obviously there's going to be somebody statistically that is listening to this that will in the future be diagnosed with cancer. I think for those who have not been through chemo, that's the biggest scare for them because they've seen people
Yeah.
who've been sick. So do you mind explaining exactly what that sensation is like? And obviously people go through it and they survive it. If you have any advice too on the best way to make yourself ready for it.
I don't know if there's any way you can be ready for it.
Mhm.
All I can say is that it's not as bad as you think it is. It's none of it is. It's just bizarre. You know, you'd think the worst thing would be to have the chemo. That's what I was praying not to have. And by gosh, I had to have chemo and radiation. I didn't have to have a mastectomy, but I had everything else. Now, I had an option to do it in a room by myself with my mom just there the first time. And that was very comforting to be able to be alone with her. But I would also suggest that you do it in the room with the other people too, because that's where you're all sitting around. You look around, you see somebody who's knitting, somebody else is reading, somebody else has speakers on. It's kind of where you just realize we're all the same thing right now,
Mhm.
the same
Mhm.
person worrying about the same thing. So there's something too in not having that solitude, but seeing. So I would encourage you to do that if you're going to have the chemo, to see other people going through it. I had a bad reaction the first time and I could feel my face getting real red and numb, and I had a anaphylactic shock. I went into anaphylactic shock.
Mhm.
And so they had to do it 3 times slower, and they gave me whatever they needed to do to knock it down, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was just long and boring. I didn't have too many side effects from the chemo aside from losing my hair. I remember getting itchy, my body being itchy, but the radiation was really kind of what knocked me for a loop, and that just wore me out.
Mhm.
That just gave me, I just sapped my energy. But the chemo itself, but I do know people that have had a different kind of chemo and they get very, very sick. It's just different for different people.
Right. Well, and a shout out to the people who take care of you while you're on the machines
That's
because
it.
right,
Yep.
I had dialysis, which is not similar in what's happening to you, but similar in the environment and the seats and the machines next to you.
Yep. It reminded me when I was reading that in your book, I remember thinking, ooh, this is like,
That's what a
yes.
chemo room looks like. Well, it was the big personalities. To me, I always said that disease is 80% mental, 20% physical because you have to really, like you said, you put your blinders on. Like I tried to find as many distractions as I could from thinking about my condition because you're only making it worse by worrying, right? So
Yes.
you got to focus on something else and so like in dialysis, yeah, it was certain personalities of people that I just started looking forward to seeing every time I had to go and
Exactly.
interacting with them. And so and like you said, we're all doing the same thing. You're not alone. It sucks, but there's a survival instinct I think that at least for me and I'm assuming for you and everybody who is ill that there's a survival instinct that kicks in that allows you to have that focus.
Absolutely. And not only that, you just brought up a word that's so important to talk about, and that is worry. And that was one thing that night that I was praying in bed, and that, everything just sort of came to me. It
Hmm.
was like you can spend hours agonizing and worrying and thinking, okay, what am I going to look like with a bald head? Everything that I don't want to put a kerchief on, or am I going to lose my eyelashes, my eyebrows? Am I going to die? That wasn't even the first question, right? I'm worried more about my
Right.
hair than am I going to die? And what they'll tell you is, I don't know. If you worry and spend time worrying, you are losing life. You are wasting time. Worry is like the worst thing we can do is worry.
Yeah.
And you just put it away and focus. Just focus on what you've got to get done here. Do not worry, because I'd say 90% of the time what you're worried about doesn't end up happening. Really and truly, it's crazy how much of the time nothing happens.
I want to acknowledge one thing before we start wrapping up. When I was going on dialysis and when I was going through my issues, I was not a mother either. And then, because you mentioned earlier about,
Yes.
parents and, especially women who get diagnosed with this. And there are plenty of mothers who begged God for life and it wasn't meant to be. Right. And so I just remember during COVID, I had to take COVID very seriously. And I remember thinking, my son was 5 at the time, and I remember thinking, okay, just to this worry conversation, if I get this, it's probably going to take me before the vaccines. And so I thought, okay, now what is my biggest concern? And that was my son. And so I wrote him a letter to explain to him why he should not let this ruin his life. And,
Oh, Melissa.
and to explain to him that it's not an excuse, that if you're mourning for me, then you got to understand I'm somewhere making sure that you don't use this as an excuse to not live. And I put it in an envelope and I sealed it up and I put it in my home safe, which it's still there. And I let Katie Joe know that it was there. Look, if the worst happens, now my worry is alleviated. And
Yes.
so to communicate with him in case the worst happened the way I need him to understand it. And so I don't know if that would help anybody else.
Yes,
But
it would.
like you said,
Yes.
anything to avoid to get away from that worry.
Yes, but what you're saying right there is you were okay at the time, right? So you're not writing this as you're on your deathbed.
Right.
You're writing it when you're okay and can think straight. It's yeah, that's a brilliant thing. I think
Yeah.
that's brilliant, because I love kids. I would have loved to have a lot of kids. I just never found the right guy. But I know how I would feel about nieces and nephews,
Yeah.
and those kids that they're not completely reliant on me. That's what kind of blew my mind, is that I'm talking to so many people that have children, that have a reason to really, they've got to live. That's what they think. They've got to live. And sometimes you don't. It's just,
Right.
yeah, I
Well,
can't
yes,
imagine.
it's a part of the process for some, and it's part of the process for all of us eventually. I want to move forward before we end to the feeling that you had when you realized it was gone.
I had a great surgeon, and she said, "Congratulations, you're cancer free," as soon as I had my lumpectomy. And I'm sitting here thinking it was just the beginning of my journey, right?
Mhm.
But it was gone then. And that was a great thing to say, because then it just made me fight harder, with the chemo and the radiation, to make sure that there isn't some insidious little cell in there, that's going to try to take over my whole body. It's a fight. It is a fight. And you just do everything that you possibly can to not have it come back. You
Yeah.
do everything you possibly can, everything. Don't worry about the hair. Don't worry about being tired. Don't worry about missing this or missing that. Get through it, do it, because it's going to lead to a great life when you get through it. It's just it's amazing. I feel very blessed. I feel lucky. I feel like, why my friend Marcy, who is 15 years younger than I, died
Mhm.
and I didn't. Sometimes there's that little bit of guilt there, but I realize that's not, again, that's worrying and putting stuff in that you can't.
Survivor's guilt is a huge part of having illnesses. Going back to your faith, my thing is, well, I don't know how everything works, and so I'm not gonna try to figure that out now, right?
Right.
So,
That's exactly right.
and you did a phenomenal job honoring her. By the way, I was able to volunteer for something where you honored her. So, Kaedy, you express all of this in a positive manner, right? Where you move forward and help other people and acknowledge the people that are no longer with us. And that's, I mean, that's all anybody wants, is to be remembered, right? And
That's
you've done
right.
that, right?
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. And remember the people close to her too. Yep, yep, yep.
All right, Kaedy, before my final question, is there any like organization, things you're involved in, anything that you would like to plug so that people can get more information or get involved in something?
I think find your good space with that. For a while, I was on the board of a grassroots. They've kind of gone a little dormant right now, but a grassroots charity, and there are others like this, so you can find them that would provide money for bills that needed to be paid or for transportation for women that needed money, right? That couldn't get
Mhm.
to chemo and radiation and stuff down at Grady Hospital here. And so I thought, ooh, that's a really great thing that I can kind of get behind and feel great about, because then you meet their kids and you give them their Christmas party and that was a wonderful way. Research is super duper important. If that's what you're into, then find the greatest breast cancer research charity. There are so many different needs within it that I just think it's kind of a personal thing.
Kaedy, since this podcast is called Facing Inward, what has your experience that we've discussed taught you about yourself?
Oh, that I'm way stronger than I thought I was. That
Mhm.
really am way stronger. And it's just made my faith that much more. It never was a question, but now it's just, I'm just, when I do lose someone, I know where they are and I know I'll be seeing them again. There's just no doubt.
Facing Inward is an extension of my book, Facing Inward, available anywhere books are sold. This podcast is a production of Wanging Dude Publishing, all rights reserved. Thanks for listening.